So, what we're looking at here are three different color spaces or color gamuts laid out in the LAB color space, which is a three-dimensional way of talking about defining and interpreting color. So if you can imagine this color globe superimposed on these forms, that would be the attainable colors or color space of these shapes that we're looking at. So this red form is an RGB color space, and that's what you're seeing anytime you look at a monitor, television, phone. Anything that's using light is mixing red, green, and blue light to make all the colors that you see. They call that additive color mixing because when you mix red, green, and blue light simultaneously, you get white. This green form here is an organic CMYK color space, and that's mixing the colors cyan, magenta, yellow, and black to make all the colors that you see. It's known as subtractive color mixing because more often than not the substrate you're printing to is white, so you take all the colors away and you get white. Now they have printers that are up to 16 color printers, but we won't get into that today. This blue form here is our ceramic CMYK color space. So basically what we're looking at are the attainable colors of these three different methods of producing colors.
It's the smallest one.
Correct. Yeah. So we can see how limited we're going to be with our color reproduction. Now there's a couple of gives and takes for that. Obviously, with the standard set, reds are going to be impossible to reproduce. As far as apple reds or
Marlboro
fire
reds,
reds, cherry reds,
candy apple reds, and so on.
Those are going to be impossible to reproduce with the standard set. Easier to reproduce with the selenium set.
Is it possible to make them that pure in the selenium set? Can you get really great reds?
You can. It's very difficult though, because with the selenium, not only are the adjustments, the Photoshop adjustments, detrimental, but also the firing. You really have to know what you're doing when you're firing the selenium set to get the optimal results.
So could you develop your own profile?
Oh yeah. What do you mean?
Well, so that you don't have to do this intuitively, so you can just kind of more scientifically create a image that you know that it's going to look that way when it comes out of the kiln. So you're adjusting the color, for example, with less or more blue or something, and that's a guess to see how it's going to come out in the firing?
Yeah, pretty much. So the problem is a lot of people want this to be a science, but it's an art. Like you can go through and be as meticulous as you want and develop okay, this color is going to do this, I'm going to add this amount of percentage to get this color, and so on and so forth. The problem is the printer is not going to keep going at that rate, If you replace the PCUs and the developer, well, your printer's printing color a whole new way now. If your color shifts because of humidity, your printer's printing a whole new way now.
I see that.
Yeah, so that sort of gives you an idea of, as far as the standard goes, the limitations with the red. Comes out more pinkish, as you can see. But just something to think about.
Yep.
Alright, so unless you have any questions about color spaces or the color profiling process, we'll move on to the actual Photoshop work.
Okay.
And if your students are interested or if you're curious, all these files will be on your data disk for future reference.
Okay, nice.
So you can check out the color spaces and that. So, what we're looking to do in Photoshop is actually enhance the colors that we already see. Now this depends on, of course, the model of printer. 440s require a little bit of over-saturating, and then some images on the 830 you want to under-saturate. But we'll just keep this sort of general and assume that you'll always be working with a 440.
Great, good.
Alright, so what you want to do in the beginning is practice what we call non-destructive means of photo manipulation. That way you can always revert back to the original without much fuss. And when you're developing your eye for what you're seeing on the screen and what's coming out of the kiln, depending on how important the color match or accuracy is, you want to go through rounds of what we call color testing. So what I like to do is I'll take a snippet of the image and just as it is, and then take that same snippet and apply a few adjustments based on how the printer was printing before, and then kind of expand on that, just so we get a nice range of different images with different adjustments to see where the printer is at. Then we'll fire them on a tile, look at the tile the next day, and we'll be able to say, this color looks good, but this is the blue that matches more accurately to the image. Or we'll say, this one looks good, let's go ahead and move it into production. So you fire your images with your adjustments, and that helps you get an idea of what's working, what's not, and what colors are going to be problem colors.
So using an actual image versus using those tiles that have all the colors on them makes more sense?
Oh yeah, absolutely. That way, because when you see these colors, they're just solid colors. They have a value, percentage of cyan, magenta, yellow, and blacks that are mixing to make them. But an image doesn't have any of that. It has pixels with color that have those values in that, but when you expand the image out, all those pixels blend together, which is the whole idea. So with imagery, it's better to run your color tests and then see what's working and what's not working, and base your next series of adjustments and even the next photograph you work on off of what you saw on the last bit.
Gotcha.
So solid color is not good at all for determining how the printer reacts to the adjustments that you're making. You're going to want to use imagery that has gradients in it, so you can see how those colors are blending. So, with all that in mind, I'll go over 3 adjustments that I use on a regular basis almost with every image that I work with. Again, sometimes you'll be able to print something out without any adjustments and it'll look fine and you're good to go. But more often than not, they'll require some adjustments. So what I like to use is the adjustment layers. And the ones that I use are levels, vibrance, and by far the most effective and useful is the selective color. So we'll just go through and set up a levels adjustment layer. And the reason we use these adjustment layers is because it creates the layer and we can turn it on and off. It's not a permanent adjustment. So the idea behind making the levels is, of course, if I pull this slider down, it's going to darken the image. If I pull the highlight slider, it's going to lighten the image. So we just use this adjustment to add a little bit of contrast to the image, make the darks darker.
So you're grabbing the black one or in the white ones?
So we kind of pinch both sliders in on the side, just to darken it a bit, and then counter the darkening by lightening it a bit.
I do this exact same thing with the iron decals.
Oh yeah, perfect.
Exact same thing.
Yep, that's exactly what we're after. Yeah. And then we can turn our adjustment on and off and see that we're starting to get more contrast. Some of the colors are starting to become more vivid. So that's the best place to start, is with a simple levels adjustment. And then what I like to do is move on to the vibrance. I'll mention this right now that I like things real easy in Photoshop when it comes to ceramics, because we're not getting creative. We're not trying to make anything new. We're just trying to enhance these images so they look proper when they come out of the kiln. So this vibrance adjustment layer is real effective for that. Turn it down later on, just so it's ready. it's two sliders, real simple. If you increase the vibrance slider, what it'll do is increase or decrease the saturation of your warmer colors, which you can see can create a pretty nice effect without going too far. Just be aware that when you increase the vibrance, you're increasing yellow. So your yellow output's going to be more than normal, and you may have to back up on
So you have a kind of average amount that you go. So it starts when you go to the window. You're in the middle, which is 0.
Correct.
Yes. And so what do you go to as a number typically?
Usually I go around plus or minus, well, plus 25 or so, right in there, in between 25 and 50. That usually gets the subtle effect that we're kind of looking for. It warms her up a bit without going too far. And then we have the saturation slider, which will increase or decrease the saturation of the image overall. So you can see you can get pretty carried away with that one pretty easily. So this one I usually only go around plus 5, plus 10. You can turn that off and see the effects. And in general, that's pretty much what we're looking for. Just something that's got more pop, you could say. Alright, the last one I'll go over, and again, the most effective is this selective color. Have you used this one before? Yeah, this is really cool, because you could go in and adjust the CMYK values of all of these colors without affecting the entire image. So we'll say that we've been firing this image and her eyeshadow there has been coming out a bit too green, or maybe it's too cyan. So first we need to locate that color, and it's sort of a guessing game. We'll try the cyan. Just zoom in a little bit here. So we'll try the cyans, see what happens when we increase the cyan. Yeah, it's doing a little bit. So if this image was coming, or if her eyeshadow was coming about too green, all the selective color is the standard understanding of color theory and how colors mix to make other colors. So if it was too green, we would be pulling out the yellow.
So you'd always do cyan and then cyan? All right, so you've selected this and this, right? Versus this, but not something else.
Yeah, so the way this works is it's targeting the cyans in the image, and then I'll put this back to 0. If we wanted the cyans in the image to have more cyan in them, then we would increase the cyan. And that's not doing too much. It actually affects it a lot more when we take it out. So if that were the case, that's what we do. But since these are coming out in our make-believe scenario too green, then we would take the yellow down, which is going to make them more blue.
Gotcha. Okay. That's what I was wondering, how to use those other colors. So is that the only one? The yellow is the main one?
Well, it depends on the color that you're trying to get to. So, if we wanted this eyeshadow to be purple, you take out the cyan so that more magenta comes through.
Oh, sure.
And then increase the magenta, again for the same reason, so that more magenta comes through.
Gotcha.
So we're adjusting the colors in this color, because...
So what Photoshop's doing is it's doing just the cyan and then adjusting the cyan with those sliders below that only.
Correct.
So the yellow, when you're doing that yellow, adding yellow, you're only adding yellow to those selected cyan colors.
Correct. Exactly. Yeah.
Rather than the whole photograph.
Correct. Yeah. The problem is sometimes if you watch up in this corner here, when I turn this off, this is just a little bit cyan up there, so you can see that change as I turn it on and off.
Gotcha.
Now that's probably not that big of a deal because her eyeshadow is going to be a more prominent part of the image. So it's probably not going to be that big of a deal. But it can take a bit of work to figure out where Photoshop is understanding colors to be. And if you notice, say, one color is affecting another part of the image, for instance, we'll say that we fired this and everything looked great except for her lips. Well, we're obviously going to look in the reds for that color. So if I increase the magenta in the reds to make her lips stand out, well, it's going to increase the magenta or decrease across the board. So in an instance where you've got similar colors and you want to zero in on a certain aspect of the image instead of just the color, what you can do is create a mask. So we'll just use our magic wand tool. And have you used this before?
I have. I'm not real good at it.
Oh yeah. So there's a few controls that'll make you an expert at it. If you haven't used those already. There's the anti-alias and contiguous. So if contiguous is check marked, I'll just zoom out again. Photoshop will pick up on colors that are next to each other that it understands to be the same and create a selection. If anti-alias is check marked, Photoshop will pick up on colors throughout the entire image that it's understanding to be the same. So that's one control you can use. The other one is the tolerance here. So if we increase or decrease the tolerance, Photoshop is only understanding these colors to be the same. So if we increase the tolerance, Photoshop is understanding all of these colors to be the same. So selecting your controls is just going to determine what you want to do. If you want a particular color that's throughout the image, anti-alias is the best. But if you just want a section of the image that's colored, contiguous is the way to go. So they're just touching each other. So we'll zoom in on her lips, and we'll just make our selection here. Let's decrease our tolerance first. So maybe around 20, we'll see what happens. Alright, so we've got this bit of her lips selected, and we obviously want more. So if I hold Shift, you'll see that little plus sign. So now we can add in more of her lips. And we could probably spend a fair amount of time doing this. And then if you pick up a section like that that you don't want, you hold Alt, and that will minus from your selection. So for the sake of time, we'll say that we're happy with this selection. Now what we can do is set up a new selective color adjustment layer. And you'll see here on this little thumbnail, everything that's black will not be affected, and everything white will. So now we can increase that magenta or decrease it and just adjust her lips without affecting the rest of her flesh tones. One of the things that's hardest for most people is learning Photoshop. Once you've got that, or if you have already got that under your belt, then the only challenge becomes wrapping your head around color and what you're seeing on the screen and what's coming out of the printer.
And the testing.
Yeah, the testing is huge. Like I can look at this right now and I know her lips are going to come out. I would probably pull a bit of yellow out of there and maybe even a little bit of magenta. Because if you add too much magenta in there, what's going to happen is they'll start to darken.
Oh, sure.
Yeah, so you kind of find a fine balance there. I know for a fact that our printer's printing to yellow, so with that in mind, I would adjust her flesh tones either by doing the reds or the yellows. That's where you'll find flesh tones no matter what ethnic group you're working with. And then just pull out some of that yellow, just to make it a bit softer, because I know the printer's going to
give you that yellow back in.
And
is that typical on, what is this, the 4?
Oh yeah, with all of them, they all tend to print
More
heavy
yellow?
on the yellow. Some printers print more so than others. So, best thing to do for you is like get a bunch of images with colors or themes programs that you know maybe your students will be working with.
Sure.
And then fire them without any adjustments, and just kind of zero in on problem colors. And if it is printing too yellow, sometimes they may not be too yellow, maybe just the right amount of yellow. But yeah, it's all all the trial and error.
Sure.
The fun
Sure.
part, you know.
Yeah.
So one of the consequences of these toners is that they get laid down in layers and they don't mix until they're fired.
Sure.
So the order is black gets laid down first, then cyan, then magenta, and then yellow. So your prints, no matter what you do, are going to look yellow because that.
Because yellow's the last color.
Correct. So
Got
it's
it.
laying on top, and you're looking through the yellow. But there's a trick I'll show you for guessing what it's going to look like when it fires. But one of the consequences of that separating is that they'll move around in the firing process, and the color separations will blur a little bit, which will make your image a little blurry. So it's always a good idea, and not only that, but you're looking through a thin layer of glaze, so that's going to tweak the image a little bit anyway. So one thing you can do to counter for that is sharpen your image just a little bit.
Oh.
And that's, yeah, it's always a good idea just to give it a hair of sharpening. Now there's a couple ways you can do that. Again, we'll want to practice non-destructive means of photo manipulation. So we'll duplicate our original layer. Oops, that didn't work, I just unlocked it. There we go. Alright, so we've got a copy of our original layer. And then you can go into filter, and of course you've got sharpen and all of these sharpening filters. But what I don't like about these is, again, I'd mentioned I like things real quick and dirty when we're doing our ceramics. And with these filters, it's a balancing act. You've got the amount and the radius, and you can remove blurs, you can go to advanced settings, and you've got all these buttons and knobs to tweak around with, which will slow down your process. So what I prefer is a technique using the high pass filter. So we'll go to filter, down to other, and high pass. And this is a great way for adding sort of an artistic effect to your image. But for our sharpening, what we're looking for are just tight white lines around the subject and some of the features. And as you can see, we just got this one slider, real simple, real easy to use. We're looking for one effect.
Wow.
And just for clarification, I'll pull it up just a bit more. And we'll click OK. And then the last step to this is to set your blending mode from normal over to overlay. Have you played with these
I
before?
have not.
Oh yeah.
Not this particular thing, no.
Oh yeah. So we'll switch it from normal to overlay. Now I'll turn this layer on and off, and you can see the changes. So you see how it sharpens up those
I do.
finer details? Real quick, real easy way
That's
to...
nice. That's a really good one.
Yeah, it's a neat trick. So at this point, once we've made our adjustments and everything, we'd be ready to print. We always do our work in RGB, simply because RGB files are much smaller than CMYK files. Might not play a bearing for you guys. But not only that, some of the adjustments, like that vibrance adjustment I had showed you, is not available in the CMYK color space.
Interesting.
Yeah, it's, I don't know why. But we work in RGB so that we have, even if we don't use it, we have access to all of Photoshop's capabilities. And then when we're ready to print, we'll convert to CMYK.
Okay.
And that's where your color profile will come into play.
Okay, gotcha.
So once we've made our adjustments, we'll set up what we call the CMYK print page. And we're just going to make a new document. The width and the height, just whatever size you're printing to. Resolution to match the resolution of the document that you're printing. Ideally 300 is about where you'll want to be, unless you're doing low res kind of images.
Right.
Anything higher than 300, I've compared the differences between 3 and 1200 with ceramics, and the difference is so minimal, an untrained eye would never notice.
Hmm.
You really have to look pretty hard to notice the differences.
Mhm.
So I would recommend working at a lower resolution just to save on rendering time.
Sure.
But I'll leave that up to you, your students. The color mode we'll set to CMYK. Bits work the same as resolution, just make sure that they match. And then background, whatever. So down here is where your color profile will come into play. And you'll see that all of these, between the two first and second black lines, all of those come stock in Photoshop.
Mhm.
And they all do different things. I think this US Web Coded works really good for solid colors. If you're having trouble getting an accurate color. It doesn't help with the cascading. Speaking of which, this is what I mean by the cascading effect when you're printing solid colors.
Sure.
You can either use noise to break this up, or it's wasteful, but you can print through it. That's not a good sample. So it smooths out. I mean, it's still not perfect, but it will get better than how that looks. If
And
you
how do you go from that one to the third page?
Oh, just by printing. So that's one print,
Oh, so you print
Two,
decals,
3.
clear it out. Oh, I
Yeah,
got it. Yeah.
So you can see all this is waste toner.
Yeah, got it.
Not the best practice. I wouldn't encourage it, but
Mhm.
it's possible. The best way is to add noise in Photoshop to break up your solid colors.
So if you were doing that, you might do it without decal paper, just regular paper?
Oh yeah, I've done this on regular paper, but you still are printing out the ceramic
Ceramic
toner.
stuff, gotcha.
Yeah. And while we're on that, you can send regular paper through. It won't hurt the printer at all.
Mhm.
So if you need to clear residual toner from a misfeed or something, you can just send regular sheets through.
Mm-hmm.
You can also send the decal paper through more than once.
Mhm.
So if you send a print through and you just used one side, you can use the other side for another print. Yeah, the US Wipe Swap, great for solid colors. It's easier to get a match using that. I'm not sure why. But for images, the color profile we create for you will show up down here. I'm sure the one we create for you will work better. It does a real nice job with gradients. Doesn't really muck anything up too severely. But we'll print out 2 of these so you can compare the difference and see just how powerful these color profiles can be. So we'll select the one for our 440. Yours will have University of Minnesota followed by the date it was created, so we can so we have a record of when the last time the printer was calibrated. And we'll just click OK. And the conversion's super easy. Just want to make it so you could see both documents at once. And then right-click on your layers palette, flatten image, so that all of your adjustments are applied. A couple reasons we do that. Some of them won't translate over into CMYK, and we also want to maximize the area of our decal paper, so we won't, unless we had to print one image out at a time, we'll fill it up with imagery. And that way one adjustment to a particular image won't affect another image.
Gotcha.
Pretty simple. And then we'll click and drag and drop the flattened layer, and thereby converting it to CMYK. And as you can see here, when people see this conversion, they start to freak out.
Because it doesn't look so good.
Exactly. So what's happening is this document has been assigned our ceramic color profile. So Photoshop is trying to render these colors in a way that it understands, but it's an organic way of rendering colors. And we're working with ceramics, so Photoshop has no idea how to make these colors look the way they're supposed to look when we print them. Again, some people will see this and freak out and start making more adjustments, but you actually have to print things to know what they're going to look like. So you want to get the PostScript 3 driver for your PC, and then again Mac is all just one driver. And when you go through, when you're ready to print your calibration charts, give me a call and I'll configure the driver for you. Or you can do it yourself based on the information on the training DVD or on the data disk. Everything's there. But we'll set the paper type, or media type as it's called, to thick 3, which is that thickness of the paper. Again, they have to match between computer and printer. And then under detailed settings, under print quality, depending on which version of Windows you're using, it's all going to look different, and of course it's all going to look different on a Mac. But all the settings are there. Gradation set to fast, resolution set to 1200, image smoothing set to auto, gray reproduction set to black by K, check mark or turn on the black overprint, and set the color profile to user setting. Now all of that is distinct to both platforms. However, this part is only for PCs. Here where it says PostScript output option, you want to set that to encapsulated PostScript. And then you can save them as a preset and then just click on the presets. Now we don't have to go through all that every time you print. Alright, so once you've got your page setup done, here under color management is the most important part of the printing process. You'll always want to pay attention to this section. Looks a little different in CS6, but again, everything's there. Here under color handling, you'll always want it to be Photoshop manages colors. Now, if you have the option to set it to no color management, choose that instead. However, in CS5 and later versions, CS6 and then of course the CC, the Creative Cloud, they've removed no color management. So you want to set it to Photoshop manages colors. So color handling, Photoshop manages colors. And then down here under printer profile, you want to match the printer profile with the document profile. So whatever profile you assign to the document you're printing, you want the printer profile to say the same thing. Alright, so now that we're synced up and matched, we're ready to print. So judging by our print, we can see she's quite a bit too yellow. And it's really yellow across the board. This is looking a little green.
Yep.
So what I would do is set up a selective color adjustment layer, and you can do that just down here. Get the little circular guy here. So we'll set up selective color, switch over to the neutrals so it affects it across the board, and just pull down some of that yellow. And that's going to take some guesswork too. That's obviously too much, but I would, just off the top of my head, probably go to about, let's see,
So it should look just a little
about there.
less yellow than you want it to be, because it's
Yeah.
going to get more yellow when it fires.
Correct.
Okay.
And keep in mind, if you're winging it, like I'm winging it right now, by making the adjustment on the CMYK page, it's not going to have as dramatic of effect as if you were to do it in RGB.
Gotcha.
If you really want to adjust an image, do it in RGB and convert to CMYK. If you want to make a fine-tuned correction, you can do it on the CMYK print page. But it's best to do your adjustments on RGB.
Gotcha.
For the diagnostic chart, as well as the charts for the calibration process, are untagged, which means they don't have any profile assigned to it communicating between the computer and the printer how to render colors. So there's a certain way you want to print these. Go to File, Print. Here under our document profile, we can see it's untagged. So again, we always want color handling to be Photoshop manages colors. And then under the printer profile, we want to set that to Photoshop 5 default CMYK. And then it's going to print these colors as they are.
So you're printing these as a decal? Are you printing these to fire?
Oh, no, if you were to check, if you were checking for a streak,
Oh, I see.
Or,
I see. Got
yeah,
it.
we use the diagnostic chart to determine a lot about how the printer is functioning.
Gotcha.
So if you encounter a problem, we may just have you print this right off the bat.
On regular paper.
Yeah, that's
Gotcha.
fine. So if you get results when you print this that look like this, what's happening is the printer isn't printing colors as they are. It's trying to mix colors to make black and the other colors instead of just printing them out as they are. It should look like this. So if you get weird results, again, double check your color handling. Only thing you need to know is just turn the temperature all the way up to the highest setting. In the first couple of weeks, it's going to put off a funny smell and might even smoke a little bit.
Sure.
So it's best to leave it on for 2 hours before using it in that initial break-in period. Otherwise, your toner may not fuse completely. It does have a forward and reverse motor. It's never happened, but if something gets stuck in there, you can back it back out with the reverse. But again, that's never happened. And then your lamination paper. We have 5 different kinds of lamination paper. 2 are for the selenium toner set. There's the green, which is a higher firing and leaves a glossier finish. And then there's the pink, which is for lower firing, like enameled metal or glass. So that's the selenium set. The blue is for the food safe toner set. And then the yellow and the orange are for the standard toner sets. The yellow leaves a nice gloss finish, pretty standard stuff. It's the orange that does not have the flux in it, which will not leave behind what we call flux shadow. Or
Well,
it
which gets into questions about application. So if you printed a page, could you cut the image up and apply it and stop the gloss where you wanted it to?
Yes, and yes. Unfortunately, you can't cut the image flush. So you need at least a 1/16 to 1/8 of an inch of that cover coat extra. Otherwise, the toner peels back in the firing process.
Does it happen every time?
Not every time.
Would that happen on a flat surface more than the slightly curved surface?
Oh yeah.
There's a technique that I use with iron decals sometimes, and then as I paint gum arabic on the edges, seal them down better.
That's a great idea. So we'll apply some lamination paper, or laminate. We'll just use our yellow here. And when you're applying it, just remember they're all separated by these sheets of tissue paper. You want to make sure to remove it.
Before you cut it?
Correct. You also notice that it's a little coloring difference there. It is sensitive to light, but the light doesn't affect the quality or anything. It just shifts the color.
Yeah.
So, at this point in time, I'll point out that the toner does not fuse completely to the paper, so it's easy to scratch that off. All right, and the lamination paper is the most expensive part of the process. So you want to conserve as much of this as you can. And unless this sheet was completely covered with images, you'd never laminate the whole thing. So what we'll do is cut it down on 3 sides. And again, you can't cut it flush to the image, so you want about an edge that looks just like so.
About 1/8 of an inch,
Yep. Easiest way to make that with this cutter is to align the image up with the right side of this blue guide, and it'll make you a perfect edge every time.
Take a picture of that cutter. Looks like the one we should have.
Yeah, these are great for what we do. And then you'll get your lamination paper. Easiest way to remember the orientation is that the color mates to the color. Just lay your printed image on top of the yellow laminate. And now the lamination paper you do want to cut flush to your cutout, so there's none of that extra hanging out. And we'll just stick it out a little bit. You kind of got to guess where this metal edge is at. That's pretty good.
And how small of a piece can you feed through this machine? 3 by 3?
You can feed really any size through,
Mhm.
but if it's too small, it's not going to stick out the back.
Ah,
So in that case, if that happens, you just send a larger piece through and it'll push it the rest of the
just
way.
regular paper?
No, you'll want to have some thickness to it, otherwise it'll cruise over the top of
Oh,
it
sure.
or underneath.
Gotcha.
But yeah, you want it to be the same thickness and it'll push it right out.
Okay.
And then we leave one side longer so that when it comes out of the lamination paper, or the laminator, it's easy to peel off.
Gotcha.
Cut off that excess there. Turn on our motor. Motor. And now we can feed it through. And it makes no difference which way you put it in, which side's up or down. But I do like to put it in like this.
Can I see it once?
Sure.
So we have, I want to make sure the camera knows this. This tissue is short of that thicker. Okay. And what's the reason again for that shift there? So you can peel it off easily?
Correct, yeah.
Okay. Okay.
If you cut it flush, and it's that they're the same size, it's not impossible. This little handle just makes it easy.
Oh, gotcha. Gotcha.
And I like to put it with the decal side face up, just because if the lamination paper shifts a little bit, it's easier to see,
Mhm.
and then you can back up the decal and save it.
Eats the heck out of some
Hardly ever
screen,
happens.
doesn't it?
Oh, yeah. Alright, so once it comes through, you don't need to wait any amount of time. You could just peel off that back and it's
Now
ready
it's
to
ready to
go.
go in the water.
Yeah.
Cool.
And you'll notice some people freak out when they see that speckling occurring.
This is the texture of the paper, right?
Correct, yeah. The heat transfer paper is just not perfectly smooth, and when you screen it, the liquid soaks into there, and yeah, it just looks
Yeah.
messy. But.
Sure.
Alright, so when you're ready to apply, you want to use some water that's fairly warm. Not
Give
too
it-
hot, too cold.
Basically, normally lukewarm, yeah.
Yeah. And if you wanted to do a curved surface, you would use warmer water than this. Just keep in mind, the heat will eventually melt the decal. So if it's too hot for you, too hot for the decal. It's an easy way to remember that.
Sure.
And then, again, it's also helpful to put the piece in the microwave if you're doing those odd shapes in that.
You put the piece in the microwave to heat up the tile?
Correct, yeah.
Uh-huh.
So if we had, what we do, sometimes we do 12-inch tiles, so we use our large format printers. But of course, the Ricos don't print all the way to the edge, so it clips off just a little bit of the image, and it won't cover the entire 12-inch tile. So what we have to do is heat up the tile and the decal
So you can stretch it to the edge. How about that?
Yeah.
Then do you fold the tissue around the edge?
You can. You don't have to. You can just leave the edges hanging up unless there's toner hanging off the edge.
Oh.
If there's toner hanging off the edge, that's going to fall down on whatever's below it. But if it's just the cover coat or the tissue hanging off the edge, it won't cause any problems. It'll shrink up and disappear before anything else happens. So, you want to get some alcohol. We use 91% isopropyl alcohol. So we'll clean off the ceramic or porcelain just to ensure not so much dirt, but grease is really what we're trying to get rid of. I can't think of a good application for it. So once you get your piece clean, you can dip your decal. And I'm sure this is all going to be pretty familiar to you.
Yeah. I always go like that and then I flip them over.
Oh yeah.
And then they stay flat.
Yeah.
That's just what I do. I mean, it's
Fair enough.
because I don't like unrolling them.
Oh yeah. I just pick them up by the corner and they'll
There
just
they are.
flip down. Yeah. So when it's in the water, I'm not sure if you're aware of this or not, but you don't want to leave it in there too long. If you do, the starch that's on the decal paper will dissolve and there won't be anything there to stick it, and you'll get those defects. All you need to do is just get them wet and put them
Set
right
it
off to
over
the
here.
side.
Yep.
Mhm.
So this has been in there plenty of time. Oh, see,
Oh,
it's
yeah.
coming apart.
Yeah, that was on the verge.
Was it?
Uh,
Because it's
yeah.
sliding around like that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Even, it's hard to say what you can get away with and what you can't. But if you come back and you see a decal floating on
Floating.
it's not a good sign. Yeah. If you got a bit of gum arabic, you may be able to save it.
Yeah. Gotcha.
So what I like to do, I'll just pull the image down and then slide it up to where I want it to be, and slide out the backing. And it helps if you think it's going to take a while to get it into position to wet the surface you're decorating before.
Yeah.
And you have a
Very
fair
common.
amount of time.
Yeah.
Alright, so you'll get 2 of these squeegees with your system.
Yep.
And you just start with your tapered edge. Start from the center and wick off, just like so. And always, it's best to go from the center and go out all the way around. You could use a fair amount of force with these. Again, you don't really have to baby much about this. Except for the prints before they get laminated. That's really the only time you want to be super careful. I don't know how many decals I've ruined or didn't notice that they're scratched and had to start over. Alright, so once you get it squeegeed, you'll get your brayer. You'll get one of these with your system. And best practice is to lay a paper towel over the top. You want to keep the alcohol away from the lamination paper because that will dissolve it.
Okay.
And then same process of going from the center and going out.
So you don't do this on plates, concave plates, because you got them silk screened, right? So that's a different deal.
Oh no, it's the same process.
See, I didn't do this with Andy Brayman's, and they were the yellow ones. So what, is just pulling out more water?
Yeah, you'll see that the paper towel helps absorb some of that that's still behind you. And that's exactly what you're doing, is squishing out the rest of that water. And you always want to go in one direction and make sure you go all the way off the piece. Otherwise, if you're going back and forth like this, well, sometimes you won't go
So
all
you'll
the
stay
way.
on, yep,
Yeah.
gotcha.
Alright, and then once you've done that a few good times with the paper towel on, always a good idea to do it some more with the paper towel off. It's really the brayer that ensures that it's on there nicely.
So this is increasing pressure to make sure that the actual glaze of the decal is touching the surface of the tile, right?
Correct. And this is how the grease will affect it, because when you, no matter how hard you press, that grease is still going to be there and it's going to obstruct the contact. Which is why we use the alcohol. And I've heard of people who don't use alcohol and get great results, so each their own. But once you've done something 1,000,000 times, it's hard to change old habits. To let them sit 2 or 3 hours before you fire them.
So you can't fire them the same day, huh?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I encourage it. I wouldn't let them sit around longer than a day. First of all, you never know what's going to fall on top of it and ruin it. Also, if it gets too cold, wherever you're storing the decal or the decorated image, if the tile or porcelain piece gets too cold, that will make the decal release from the surface.
How cold is cold?
I would say
50 degrees or colder?
50, yeah, somewhere.
50 is getting cold?
Yeah, that's pretty cold, yeah.
So you
Like, I don't even, in the winter, I don't even like to leave anything out in the warehouse. It could be superstition, but I've had some...
No, I'm with you.
Yeah. Yeah, but once you're comfortable with your skills and everything, you can decal something, put it right in the kiln and fire it.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay.
As long as you're comfortable and it's not a really expensive piece, because things can still go wrong. But if, like, say, if it's just a tile or you're real confident, yeah, you can put something in. Like, I wouldn't second guess putting this in and firing it.
You know, the thing about commercial glazes, like these tiles and some of these other objects you have around the room,
Mm-hmm.
those glazes have been formulated to fit the body that they're being applied to. The coefficient of expansion of the clay body and the glaze. So there's a perfect match between the two.
Really?
In my world, it's never the case. And unless you look at the glazes under a microscope, you wouldn't see this, but I could have a gloss glaze applied to a piece of stone or to a piece of porcelain and have it fired to 2350. And I could apply a decal to it, and I wouldn't be able to fire it the same day. And the reason I wouldn't, and I never do, I might on the commercial stuff, but I would never on handmade stuff, because the glazes are actually not fitting 100%. The coefficient of expansion of the two materials, when they're heated up in the kiln, as they cool, one shrinks more than the other. Usually the glaze shrinks more than the clay. And there's minute little cracks in the glaze.
Is that how crazing happens?
It is how crazing happens.
Ah.
And crazing happens on most things, but it's not noticeable on most things. It's only when it's an extreme example that it's actually noticeable. So if I was to apply any of my iron decals or these decals on any of the things that I make, because I know that there's some break in the glaze, so there's some water getting through, so that water is slightly in the clay, or the water is right in that crack.
Interesting.
You know, on the surface of the surface of the glaze, maybe not in the clay body, but in the glaze there's a little bit of water there. If I put that in the kiln the same day, that water comes out as steam, and it blows bubbles.
Oh yeah.
In the surface of the decal.
Yep. So I will point out that right now it's real easy to take these off. You see how much nicer that looks?
Yeah, wow.
It's blacks on top.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's easy enough to pull these off if you notice, say you scratched it or something, or you didn't like it. But if it sits for a couple hours, it really starts to harden. I'll show you some of this. So this was 4 separations fired, so that's one decal applied, fired, 4 times. And I used the registration marks to line it up. But this is that orange peel effect that I was talking about.
Oh yeah.
Isn't that cool?
And how did that happen again?
I fired all 4 of them at the same time. So it's
Gotcha.
4 layers of decals.
Could this get even more saturated than this? Like, if you printed yellow on top of yellow on top of yellow, would you get
Absolutely.
a really bright yellow?